Alex Ross, welcome back to Word Balloon. First time on video. I'm thrilled. I mean, we've certainly seen each other face to face, but in these
Absolutely.
COVID times, it's great to see you, and I appreciate
See
you.
you.
Yeah, great to. I really appreciate you doing video today.
Not at all.
I'm really excited. I'm enjoying your current Marvel books, and we'll certainly talk about those. But I also want to talk about your new scrapbook for this year, which is
Scrapbook.
well, excuse me, the sketchbook.
Well, it's not a sketchbook. It is a bona fide art book because it's mostly all color.
Fantastic, man. And we're going to be showing images throughout the interview. But yes,
what is here?
Oh, that's great. Look at that, man.
It's actually it's a wraparound cover,
Clearly.
which is why it looks like that. So,
oh, that's
anyways,
great, man.
It's only got one little part here saying Alex Ross art book. So
there we go. Anyway. Yes, the Alex Ross Unseen, which I think is a great title because there's a lot of not only the beautiful commemorative poster you made for Flash that is the cover, but also some of the interiors are just amazing. And I was just telling you before we started recording how much I love some of the mashups of universes that are depicted in your book as well.
Yeah, I mean, the whole purpose is to share things that otherwise had no place to go, that have been finished projects in some cases. And here's a bunch of paintings I did that I have no other way to get out there in a book form, and projects that never saw fruition. So I might as well share the work I did with them and things like that.
That's amazing, man. And again, I think these are dream images. I'm sure for yourself. And was that the impetus, or was there hope to get a cross license for some of these things? Like you're mixing the DC universe and the Star Wars universe, and that's now it's Disney and AT&T, for gosh sakes.
Well, that was a real thing. I explained in the book about basically there's this project called Superman Star Wars, or Star Wars Superman, whichever one had the top billing. And it was very, very real between the two companies when it was still Warner Brothers with coordinating with Lucasfilm via Dark Horse. So Dark Horse was their publisher and was supposed to be the ones printing this comic book. So conceptually, there was an idea that was worked out. There was a creative team. I was involved early on with this thing, and it was approved intellectually from the side of Lucasfilm, where you have to assume George Lucas knows what's going on, but the bizarreness of we were going to have a story that takes place with characters from Earth. Think about that. Earth in contemporary times would be interacting with classic Star Wars characters, meaning that you can use Earth combined with X-Wings and C-3PO and all the rest of it. So that was something that's never still been done. And it's just this little snapshot in time when we were working on this thing that could have happened before the sale of Lucasfilm to Disney. And certainly the changeovers, all the things have changed with DC. DC is actually the ones that killed it most of all.
Wow, man, exactly. Though you can imagine the Empire and an armada just coming to Earth, and then just instead of seeing Alderaan or some of these other Naboo or some of the other planets, that it's Earth that they're attacking, and then Superman. So I don't know. I don't necessarily, because if there is a possibility someday, I don't know how much you want to reveal story wise.
Oh, I can reveal anything because it's never going to happen. I can tell you every little detail about it. It's we can talk about that for 2 hours if you want. That's fine. I mean, Kurt Busiek was supposed to write it at some point. Yeah, it was.
Alex, when you have these ideas, do you give Kurt, or Wade in the case of Kingdom Come, do you have a plot in mind? We were just talking, Wade and I last month. We did this voiceover theater where we performed the dialogue of Kingdom Come, and we had, dude, it was fantastic. We had Susan Eisenberg, Wonder Woman from the Justice League cartoon, and George Newbern, Superman.
Oh, so he did attend that, huh?
Yeah, and it was great, man. And it was just their scenes. It was the Clark Diana scenes, and really it was so great. And I asked Mark how Kingdom Come started, and he said it really started with you. Delivering the plot, and then eventually it Mark jumped in as the writer, the script, and
Yeah,
obviously
I
I'm
mean,
sure had his ideas, but yeah, tell me.
it's the graduation between working on Marvels, where I had the loose idea of wanting to do an anthology, and then I had done this Origin of the Human Torch thing that ultimately got incorporated into the larger built-up script that Kurt made, where it became one long adventure of one person's experience in meeting all these characters. So while I was working on that, working up a plot regarding the Kingdom Come project was very developed and pointed, where I knew I wanted to have a very strong structured story, so that the next person I may work with will have a lot more direction for me of where I want it all to go. And so what I provided was a lengthy written up thing with all the character designs done for multiple heroes in the future, and the general premise is there, but there was a ton of work left to be done to flesh out the story. So I had a lot of pieces, and then I could be a good collaborator in beating the script into shape with Mark.
I see. Okay. And touching back now on Marvels and what you're doing now seems to be your original vision for what you
Yeah.
wanted to do with Marvels in terms of making it this anthology. And also, I never really thought that, and tell me if I'm saying this wrong, but it seems there's Marvels and there's Marvel's X or Marvel X,
Right. It all gets very confusing.
but they're
All
both
to come
great.
out at the same
They're
time.
both great. Is the Marvel story tied to the ultimate, like, apocalyptic scenes that happen in Marvel X and of course Earth X and the Earth
Well,
X
it's
series?
just it should be perfectly obvious that we're just taking advantage of the fact that Marvels is a well-known name property. So if could be this connective tissue between that series I did 25 years ago and then the later Earth X series, calling something Marvel's X and saying this is what happened in between these two time periods, that's, why not go ahead and do it? And that's we just hope to get your attention and then hopefully get your sales. So that's, otherwise it's not like we have Phil Sheldon showing up in Marvel's X and trying to relate to that because Kurt killed him.
Yes, yes. Well, and again, well, let's start with Marvels. And your original idea of doing these anthologies. It's been great. Inadvertently, I've been talking to a lot of your collaborators. I talked to Steve Darnell on Halloween, and
Oh,
we talked about old time radio. But he told me that he was
oh,
scripting your wraparound story that you're drawing of Nightmare,
yeah.
and that's really really cool. And then also I'm excited for issue 4 because I see our buddy Hilary Barta is drawing the Marvel monsters and Fing Fang Foom and Dr. Druid, as I understand.
No, no, no. Dr. Droom.
Oh, you are doing the actual original name
Oh
of
yeah,
Dr.
yeah,
Droom. Excellent, man.
yeah. Basically, I mean, if I go into this a little bit, just that I contact
Please.
Hilary Barta to work on a story. He said of things he'd be interested in would be the 60s, early 60s monsters from Marvel. And I said, it'd be fun if you could just put in a little cameo of this character who was the very first hero character from the Marvel age that's completely forgotten. And he wasn't called Dr. Druid because that's how they recast him in the 70s when they reprinted the work. No, he was called Dr. Droom, which makes people wonder, what in the world is Dr. Droom? And I thought it'd be hysterical if he could actually do the first return of this character in modern mythology as just a throwaway gag.
That's
And
awesome.
then Hillary made it the entire purpose of the whole story. So now Dr. Droom took over everything that Hillary wanted to do with the monsters, and they barely appear in this story.
Yeah, but honestly, it's those great little, for lack of a better word, third tier nugget characters that, in the right hands, suddenly it's like, God, I never thought about this character. This is amazing. Booster Gold. I mean, look what DC's done with Booster Gold over the years, and made him a vital character in really important stories. I just think that's great. I think it's good casting. I think it's fun. You
Yeah,
know.
yeah.
So
I
what
like
do
history in the way where you can pull out something that maybe has been overlooked and grab this thing that reminds at least a handful of fans, like, oh, somebody else paid attention to this just like I did, you know. And these footnotes in history, I think, are always deserve being called out.
Understood, man. I think it's excellent. Now the next issue, well, we've got the first issue. Next issue comes out next Wednesday.
That's right.
And that's terrific. And I see Eric Powell in the credits.
That's right.
That's going to be fun to see. And really, I love all the people you've gotten who have such distinctive art. Their art is just, certainly different from yours. And it really is fun celebrating that and kind of watching all these different people. I can't wait to see what Eric does. What is his, can you tell us his characters?
Oh yeah, he's doing kind of a offshoot Fantastic Four story with the Thing and Spider-Man, Doctor Doom, and Silver Surfer. So it's great to see Eric Powell doing things in that Kirbyverse sort of material because he's got a strong artistic connection to it.
Agreed.
So it's very fitting, and it's going to be a beautiful issue. I believe this is the same issue with Paulo Rivera in it. So
what's Paulo doing?
He's doing a story of the Vision, and in that he's recalling a bunch of historic images. So he'll go through past adventures and things with the Vision, where you'll see a lot of classic moments in history painted by Paulo. So that's really cool. And yeah, there's not been a dud in the whole mixture of this anthology.
Did you get everybody you wanted involved in this project? Was there anyone that said, I can't do it?
The first guy that I had on my list turned me down after he had said yes. And that was Gary Gianni.
Ah,
yeah.
Another great Chicagoan. Absolutely, man.
Yeah, no, he was my number one and my first phone call. And he said basically because of the other work that he had going on, which happens to be illustration stuff he continues to do for books based upon George R.R. Martin's Game of Thrones stuff, and which he's already done a ton of.
Yeah.
And he could have taken a break for a while to do this little thing. I asked him if he's like, give me 2 pages, just 2 pages, just a spread. We'll put, some text on it and call the story. And his good friend, one of the other collaborators, Scott Gustafson, he agreed to be part of it. And that's exactly what we did with his 2-page painted spread. We've got text on it that he wrote, and it's a beautiful way to get this illustrator who otherwise wouldn't do any superhero comics material. And I thought I could get the same out of Gary, but Gary wanted to do a full immersive story, but just said, unless he can do that, given his schedule, he didn't want to try and do anything at all.
I understand. No, I love when Gary, it got his shadow stuff from the 90s and even recently his great Hellboy things that he does and those wonderful Flesk adaptations of Jules Verne and the like that he's been doing for like the last 20 years. No, again, I love Gary. I love Tom too, sadly, his brother that we lost this year.
And that had a big impact over the last couple of years, that everything related to Tom was much more front of mind for him. So I probably shouldn't go into it too much, but it was a big loss for us for all of us, especially Gary, to lose him this year.
I hear you, man. No, I have a Tom Gianni shadow on my wall of commission that he did. And,
nice.
It's one of my favorite pieces. You can't see it, but it's on camera over my shoulder. Yeah, great guy. And Gary's a sweetheart too. So I'm sorry that they couldn't be involved. Do you want to tell us some other of your all-stars that you've got set up for this anthology?
Oh, sure. Well, there's our friend Sal Abinanti. He's going to be in that same issue with Hillary, the 4th issue.
That's great.
That's the one with the sort of send up of Rob Liefeld cover that I did. And that's a hard one to explain. But there's Lee Bermejo is
Terrific.
part of this.
Wonderful.
And he did probably the best illustrations I've ever seen of his entire career is for a story with the Silver Surfer he's doing in this. Another local Chicagoan, Mitch O'Connell, is in the series. Gosh, I'm going to forget all these great guys.
I know Dan Brereton is part of the mix.
Yes, Dan's next week. That's we've been waiting all year for Dan's issue, which is he's the lead story effectively with the X-Men. He did me the kindness of responding to a recommendation I made which was if I ever could draw the X-Men, and I actually started my year doing a recreation of a Dave Cockrum page for this recent Giant Size X-Men tribute that Marvel did. If I could do a story with them, it would be to almost embrace the whole team as they were first assembled by Len Wein and Dave Cockrum, when they had Sunfire and Thunderbird was alive, and every original member was there with all the new guys. Because as a kid, I'm thinking, that's great. Why don't they all stay together? I'll read that book.
Yeah.
And so he did that in a story where it's like a continuation of that, as if they didn't just immediately break up, which is the story that was told in, I don't know, what issue was it? X-Men 96 or something, where they...
Probably. That sounds right.
Yeah.
You know, again, yeah, I'll defer to you in terms of X-Men continuity. I can't.
Well, no, I mean, as far as remembering the numbers of issues, I can't help you there. But I mean, you know, the fact that when they introduce characters in their giant size, big splash book, and then the following installment is to kill off one of the characters and break up half the team. It made no sense to me as a kid. It's never made sense to me, especially when you lose the only Asian member of the group. Seemed like, well, that's dumb.
Yeah.
Why would you not keep him around? He's awesome.
Absolutely.
So
no,
Dan,
that's great though that Dan's doing it. Yeah, no, and who did that Spider-Man story in the first issue?
Oh, that's Frank Espinoza. He is an illustrator that's worked for many years for Warner Brothers. He's done his own comic series, Ricchetto, and somebody that I knew through the industry, but also the behind the scenes in the world of Warner Brothers animation. So that's a relationship goes back quite a while for me, and somebody that I would love to get more attention on for the comics work that he does.
And truly, I think that's the real opportunity here, is to remind people about Hillary and Brereton, but also, you know, expose them to people that they may not, know. And it's a great opportunity. So I think it's terrific the way you're doing with this. And then Marvel's X is cool because that's a really interesting story. And there's, as you said, this is kind of, you know, the prequel to the Earth X books. And we kind of learn how we get there. And it really, much like Phil Shelton, we've got this point of view character of David that the whole world is mutating around him, and he seems to be the only one that seemingly isn't affected by whatever the mutation is. And I mean, God, just tear-jerking scenes with his grandmother and his sister, for that matter.
Although that's not selling any copies right there when you bring that up. We get past all that really quick right in the first issue, and we get to the fun superhero cameos immediately.
Right, and then, of course, yes, the second issue, they get to New York, and he starts meeting a lot of his heroes and surprises as well. I mean, I loved, and again, I the 2 issues are out, so I think we're okay to spoil.
Oh no, actually, all 6 issues are out.
Oh, excuse me, Alex. Okay, I haven't read the whole series. Then shame on me. I only read the first.
Oh yeah. You can find out everything that happens to this character and how it all links up to the original Earth X series. Now it's been out for, I don't know, a month.
Okay, because
the last issue.
You know, you'll forgive me, Alex. Honestly, with pencils down and the rescheduling of everything.
Oh, it's okay.
But God, I loved the first 2 issues. I thought they were amazing, and I look forward to seeing, man, just what you did it with Earth X and everything, and how, you know, Cap, you know, becomes this stripped down figure, and he's got the A in his forehead and everything. Very, very James Bama. I really think you were channeling your inner James Bama with what you were doing with Cap.
Well, that was very conscious because I was always influenced by James Bama going back to, my whole working life, but in particular, I was thinking of him when I was working on Superman, and then when I came over to do more stuff again with Captain America, I was using the same model friend of mine and thinking of how he would remind me of some of those aspects of Bama's illustrations of Doc Savage, where he used a model named Steve Holland, who's a famous guy in artist circles because he posed for so many different paperback cover illustrations back in the 60s and 70s. And the most famous of these being the works he did with James Bama on the Doc Savage trade paperbacks.
Understood. No, and I gravitated to those paperbacks just like you did, although didn't lead me to a career in art the way that it probably did with you. But truly, that's honestly, man, that's what's so great about your art is the realism that you bring to it. And it's not really realism, but it feels like it.
Well, that's what I'm going for.
Okay. Well, there you go. Yeah, man. I always tell you, watching you paint on stage at Wizard Chicago, Jesus, how many years ago now? 15
Oh,
years
you were there
ago,
for
something?
that?
Absolutely, man. It was
Oh, wow.
it was amazing. Honestly, it was a real pleasure watching you do it live. Honestly, when I commission art, I love, and I don't want to like freak out the artist and like hover, but by the same token, I really do love watching it happen because it's like a personal performance when it's something that I've commissioned. It's like, it's like, all right, hey, Springsteen, sing me a song. All right, man, no problem. Here you go. And it's great. God, Doug Monkey, I watched him make a Superman for me. And so many, Bill Reinhold did a great classic Nick Fury for me over the years. And I mean, honestly, I'd take you on a tour of the room that I'm broadcasting, and you can kind of see some frames like right where my finger is right now and over here. And there's just a lot of art and everything. Good Lord, I've got stuff I still haven't framed that are just stacks and everything. And it's a pleasure watching people paint and draw live. It's really interesting. It's cool. And man, for you to do it in the amount of time that you had and still like do it as quickly as you did was really amazing.
Oh, well, that was also the oddity of my having a model sitting right there for the audience to see, and not really the way I would work, because I'd be sitting normally with photos and I'd be hunched over a desk or in my lap doing this artwork and, throwing my back out. But yeah, it was a pantomime of sort of what it looks like to do what I do.
Alex, I got to always bring up too, recently, now it's been, I guess, 2 years or so, since you did those great Blu-ray covers for the Universal Monster series.
Oh, yeah.
And how quickly, and just tell people how fast you were able to crank out those amazing how many paintings and how fast?
I was doing those fast? Did I?
Well, that's what Sal told me. He's like, you cranked them out over like a holiday weekend or whatever. Maybe you didn't.
Oh, I don't know. That would be one of his quotes that has no application to reality. So
all right.
No, sorry.
No problem.
He made it in a general sense, but no, those were not cranked out by any stretch. There was a lot of work done on those.
Well, they're amazing. I mean, they're scenes that should have been in the movies but weren't.
Well, actually, they're very close to kind of moments that are kind of there in a respect or another. I mean, I sort of started everything from knowing I wanted to recreate a painting that I loved that Bob Larkin did for a Hulk cover back in 1978. And I own the original to this piece of art, thankfully. Wow. And it was a Frankenstein kind of homage of the Hulk being up on a hill with all these villagers around him with torches, and he's got a girl on his arm, and there's a castle in the background and lightning in the sky. And I thought it would be hysterical if I did this exact same pose, except it actually is the Karloff Frankenstein. And so it's got this little inside sort of reference that I have no idea, since I'm never going on social media or any other forums. I have no idea whether or not anybody caught that I made this connection. So, but yeah, I built up from there and kept coming up with more compositions based upon things that intellectually seemed like they were in the films, and maybe just from a different angle, you might have had this more striking shot and composition.
Fair enough. That's cool. No, that's amazing. All right, now, and it's interesting because you mentioned, and I mean, everyone thinks when they think of the Frankenstein monster, they think of Karloff. But I have to say, I also love Glenn Strange's Frankenstein. And and again, you're a movie guy. He only made a couple as Frankenstein, but I loved his depiction.
Well, actually, Glenn Strange, didn't he do more than a couple?
Well, I know he did. He did Abbott and Costello.
Yeah.
Ghost was Chaney, right? Ghost of Frankenstein. Frankenstein versus the Wolfman was definitely.
That was Lugosi, and
of course he did House of Frankenstein and House of Dracula. You're right.
That's what I was wondering, is if he was in both of those. But of course, Karloff did 3 movies in a row playing the monster. But of course, the distinctive difference there is they kept both changing the makeup with each installment, but he also put on more body weight with each successive picture. So the first one is when he's particularly gaunt in his face, and that makes the most striking memory of how to draw this character. And so for decades, artists were so influenced by the first cinematic version of him that it sort of overshadows everything else, because he was such a unique frame to have built all that makeup on. And they already, with him being a thin guy, and when he took out these dentures that filled in part of his missing teeth on one side, pulling out the dentures meant that his cheek sucked in, and it created an even more skeletal appearance for the man. So it was a help to the makeup, it bringing this extra level of creepiness. So you know, there's no better face, never going to be a better face for that Frankenstein monster than Karloff. And I'm a big Wrightson Frankenstein fan, but you know, there's the skull face and then there's the Karloff face, and at the end of the day, it's sort of like the Karloff face will be the icon.
Sure.
You know, it's hard to remove that nose and then feel like it works the same way.
Did you ever talk to Bernie about his version of Frankenstein?
Never about that. I don't think I asked him anything. I did spend some time with him back in the 90s, so I just had gotten the impression, I was told, like, he doesn't want to talk comics with you, whoever you are. He doesn't want to talk about how you're influenced by him, and he doesn't care. So
okay.
But he was very nice otherwise. He liked to hang out with guys.
Do you know Tim Bradstreet? Are you friendly with Tim?
Oh, yeah, yeah. In fact, Tim and I used to be mistaken for one another when we both had long hair.
He and I, we went to college. We didn't go to the same college because he was at Illinois Wesleyan and I was at Illinois State, but they were literally down the street from each other. So we went to the same comic stores during college. And we've we certainly stayed in touch. And he introduced me to Bernie.
Oh,
and,
good.
And it was terrific. And yeah, and I mean, no, I love Tim. Tim's amazing. And boy, Tim would have been
What's Tim
cool.
doing now?
You know, honestly, that's a damn good question, man. I should try and reach out and see if he'll respond, sadly, with social media, because that's, you know.
Yeah. No,
the high school reunion that never ends, as I always like to think. Hey, remember me?
I would love to know more about him, but
yeah, man. Well, I'll try and do my legwork for you, and I'll let you know, man. Jesus,
please.
So I also, again, going back to the new book, not only some of these great genre bending moments when you've got Star Wars and Superman together and the like. I also love. There we go. There it is once again. I can't wait to get it. I'm glad it's back from the printers. I know. When will it be available? I would hope like within a month or so, or if not already.
Well, I was told that I guess we're fulfilling orders on Black Friday, meaning that we'll be shipping out, beginning to ship out. It won't arrive Black Friday, but it will be, you know, it's a wait list is up right now. So then that means we accept orders. Is this right? I don't know how any of this works.
Yeah.
But I was told Black Friday's the sale day, and we physically have all the copies. It's not one of those things that's waiting for people's orders before we print. No, we printed everything.
Great.
And we could hopefully sell enough that we could go into another printing. But ultimately, yeah, it's ready to go. It is a finished product, and it's very, very well printed, which is not something I can always say with everything I work on. Printing is a imprecise science, particularly if publishers kind of don't put the best resources on your material. But we were able to get this printed by the same company that does stuff for Aspen.
Great.
And they do a great job. I wish I could tell you their name, the company name, but either way, this printer's fantastic. I'm very happy with the final work, and it's very sharp, vibrant imagery. So it's something I love to share this with everybody because of how happy I am with the final product.
I love in going into the DC universe. I love that you always manage to find new inspiration with the 1966 Batman, the Adam West version of Batman, and you really give him that hero treatment that he absolutely deserves, and all the characters. In fact, you opened the book, and then we're showing the Julie Newmar Catwoman images from the book, which are just gorgeous. And as you're getting to that, I will show an image of the Batmobile. There you
show this one. This is when you're talking real lost history. Is the Legend of the Superheroes 2-part TV special from '79.
Yep.
They didn't have Chris Reeve and Linda Carter in it, but this piece of art I created was called DC '79, just to sort of say, at one point they had cast this many of DC's properties and shared them with the world. And, it's becomes this lost part of history. Like, that actually happened. And Adam West and Burt Ward were playing the same parts again in '79. But yeah, that happened 10 years before the Michael Keaton Batman.
And they looked credible. I mean,
Yeah.
they did look like they just stepped out of an episode to do these ridiculous TV specials that we loved. I mean, good Lord. I mean, honestly, I was excited. I mean, it's easy to go now and see the bootleg DVDs that exist, or even watch DC Universe, the streaming service, and they had the specials on there, looking very clean. But again, it was just like the early '70s Marvel movies, where it's like, hey, this is all we had. We were very happy. I got to meet Red Brown last year and tell him. Yeah, and I'm like, dude, you were a great Captain America. You were a very credible Captain America, and he appreciated it. He's sweet about it.
Oh, that's nice.
Well, he's a giant Hulk. He looks like Steve Rogers after he gets the super soldier formula.
Yeah, no, he definitely had the build, that's for sure. I mean, the only thing that throws off that whole thing was just the motorcycle helmet, which we all thought, like, can't you just take that off and run around with that classic costume? But, they wouldn't. My only piece so far that I've done of any of the Marvel stuff from that period is this one I did with Chris Reeve and Nicholas Hammond back to back.
Outstanding.
As a kind of a recreation of the back of the tabloid Superman versus Spider-Man comic from '76. So, the context for all these illustrations where I did mashups of actors who played these certain parts was for a virtual reality museum that was going to be constructed. It was actually finished, and then the platform it was going to be released on, the deal fell through or whatever. Oh. It wasn't furthered. The materials all still exist, but these paintings were commissioned to fill this space. And because as paintings, they really had nowhere to go, because they're a mixture of both company properties that don't cooperate together and actors' likenesses that would all never get cleared. So to do certain concepts of like, okay, mix everybody from these run of these character movies or TV shows, or, having like, say, George Reeves crossover with Adam West and Burt Ward. Those are things I can paint, but there's no other place that can go because a company like DC can never print it. And a lot of times you're never going to get the approval for, even on a one-time basis, for these kind of fun ideas to cross over. The first piece I can show you is the Star Wars, Star Trek.
Wow. Yeah. That's fantastic.
Again,
Jesus.
Has nowhere else to go except in a book like this one, where I'm just finally sharing these images with the hardcore people that would follow the kind of stuff I might sell online.
Understood. Well, again, you got a great audience, Alex, and we're always excited to see these kind of images finally come together like that. And you're the right guy to do it. I mean, it's really it's so much fun. Really enjoying these pieces, and I look forward to getting my copy of the book and enjoying them as well. And Marvelocity was so great, and the DC one you did, and now I'm blanking on Mythology.
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
So yeah, I mean, these are terrific. Let's stay in the DC universe for a second, because I mentioned the Adam West Batman. You've also done incredible pieces for the Batman Black and White series, and then you did your story with Paul Dini.
Mm-hmm.
We're actually, it's funny, you're doing your book is coming out on Black Friday. Me and my friends at Mainframe Comic-Con are doing a Black Friday event as well, where we're celebrating Batman. And I was hoping to get your thoughts on the character in general, but also specifically both the Adam West version and what you did in modern days. I mean, and starting with Black and White, but I mean, really everything you did, including the Justice series, and anytime you've the great one shots that you and Paul did, the Treasury size editions that you got did. But yeah, tell me, just your
Well,
thoughts on
actually, I mean,
Batman.
something that, since you're reflecting upon the Batman Black and White story, what one thing that comes up that I haven't necessarily talked about in any public forum is it was our reaction to the kind of characterization of the Joker as who he really was, who he could have likely have been, and Paul putting out his version, which he had originally intended for an episode of the Batman animated series. And when he explained the story to me, I thought, oh my God, we should do that. And I had just been given the opportunity to do a story for Batman Black and White. So we put out our kind of rebuke of the idea of him actually being a crazy guy who had lost his mind, but he was always, in fact, this criminal who had a certain leaning that was already, he was a bad egg. And that the whole nuts angle was just something that kind of kept him from going to the electric chair. So in our own way, that was a rejection of the version that was classically accepted about who the Joker was, but also the Alan Moore Killing Joke version, where he made him this hapless, failed comedian who then, has one really bad day and all that stuff. As I assume most people listening to this probably, they know their Killing Joke. And the thing is, I love that series, or I love that one shot in terms of the art of it and the striking nature of how bold and violent the story was. But I ultimately hated what it did to continuity, and I hated the sort of the general idea of that character being nuts. So come to today, where now we've got an Oscar-winning film where the director and actor really invested themselves in the idea of, no, this guy's supposed to be crazy, and let's get into that idea and see how possible that is, that he should be this unbalanced mind. And they put a lot of thought and development into it. That's the first time it's sort of changing my mind about this character. So I've already put out one version of what I thought seems reasonable, and then they've done another version that I could go, oh, well, you made a very good point.
I get it. And also, yeah, to me, it almost seemed like he was medicated and maybe he shouldn't have been medicated. And that's why he was struggling. And then when he took a bit off the medication, he did become more psychotic, or not psychotic, but, I forget the right psychological term, but essentially that, like, just amoral. And that, no,
Yeah.
he's very much in control of who he is. He just doesn't have that compassion gene. And, it's like, this is what we get. I mean, and it's funny because at first when I watched it, and I wonder if did you have that feeling right away coming out of the theater? Because the movie, like a fungus, grew on me, and it kind of invaded my mind. And I really was like, I must like this movie more than I realized, because I'm still thinking about it. And that's great art.
Oh yeah, yeah. I mean, I was really impressed with the thought and all the performance within it. I never expected I'd see a movie where just looking at an actor's face, I was seeing the Joker within that form. Because up until this point, aside from getting, a middle-aged Jack Nicholson to play the part back in '89, or which we always thought that Jack should play this part, but we didn't necessarily get the One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest Jack. You then later have a series of handsome men playing the part. Where, I mean, and they did great work, but it's the fact of getting a guy who could basically contort himself and lose the amount of weight to create that body shape. And then on screen, his features, I never would have thought, I mean, the guy who was the bad king in Gladiator, that he would make such an excellent Joker without makeup, that you could see that face in him, not smiling. Just, it was an amazing feat. And, my kudos to the director and to the actor for pulling that off. So
Agreed. And also, like you said, following Heath Ledger and the amount of praise that he got, resulting in his Oscar nomination. No, isn't it interesting that it's the dark characters that the Academy responds to rather than the heroes.
It's amazing to me that it keeps constantly being, let's hire the prettiest men we can to get them to go off script and do their wacky kind of, career defined sort of performance. Like, I want to see physically appropriate casting happen most of the time. And that's what I'm usually drawn to. It's like getting that guy like Chris Reeve, who seems like he was sort of, like, where did you find him? My God,
Yes.
you found the character. So
Agreed. No, and it's funny, we just lost Sean Connery, and I love how much, because the comic strip of James Bond existed like 4 years before Dr. No.
did
And
it
if you
really?
look, yeah, if you look at John McCluskey's drawings,
Oh, wow.
and especially even his early drawings, I don't know if they were casting towards the comic strip or not, but I mean, no, he looks like, I mean, if you go to the original, like I believe they started with Casino Royale, of course. And if you go to that original strip, it very much looks like Sean Connery in those
No
strips.
kidding.
Oh yeah. Oh yeah.
Wow.
Because Dr. No was 62, and the Daily Mail was running the James Bond comic strip in 58.
I
So in
did not
fact,
know that.
Desmond Llewellyn, Q, he's like, oh, I was a fan of the strip before I was chosen to be Q in the movies. And it's like,
Oh,
yeah, so there you go. Oh, I'm always happy that I share something with you that you don't know, Alex. That's good. I
well,
like
I
that.
know that there's been reprinting of that material from the UK. I
Oh
just
yeah.
didn't know that it went back that far.
Yep. Yep. And certainly I'm sure they leaned into it with subsequent stories once they did cast Connery. But yeah, it's pretty cool. It's pretty cool.
Yeah,
So
and of
John
course,
McCluskey.
those one of those properties where basically, if you have the license, like I know Dynamite does, you can't use any actor's likeness. So you're stuck with this sort of amorphous version of the character that you can't put specific features that anybody could have a claim to, or say, well, that looks a little bit like Roger Moore. They have to keep him almost completely vanilla.
Had you ever, even in your books and stuff, have you ever painted a Bond yourself?
No, no.
No.
To me, it's all about the specifics of that given performer that you're trying to emulate. Now, technically, as far as illustrating Bonds, I've drawn lots of the actual guys who played Bond in different ways, influencing, like, say, whenever I draw Tony Stark, it's Timothy Dalton.
Yep.
And when in Kingdom Come, I was doing the older Green Arrow, I wasn't looking at photos of Sean Connery, but I was kind of transmitting that influence because he played Robin Hood before, and
Sure.
I was trying to kind of connect with that. And recently, this is a really goofy thing to mention, but you know how I've done this Doctor Strange thing in my anthology, with mostly with his villain Nightmare taking the lead in it, but
Yes.
Doctor Strange is there too. And when I illustrate Doctor Strange, I use as my reference source a doll of Pierce Brosnan.
Interesting. Wow.
Now, why him? I don't know. Just sort of a distinctive face, good shape to it, and I've been consistently doing that for years now.
Well, since he's grown his beard and mustache, he to me looked like an elderly Ollie Queen. And I know I saw a picture of him, within the last just couple of years, and I'm like, oh my God, he would be a great Dark Knight Returns Green Arrow or Kingdom Come Green Arrow. Yeah. Yeah. So
I don't
pretty
want to
cool.
see Pierce Brosnan be bald, though. He doesn't need to be bald. That's not. That shouldn't have to happen.
Yeah,
to
he's got good
everybody.
hair. He's got good hair. Absolutely, man. No, I can appreciate that. That's hilarious. I understand that you had a Fantastic Four pitch that you've been trying to get over at Marvel. Am I correct about that? Sal mentioned that to me.
Right. That's part of the book. And to be fair to them, what's in the book is not something they necessarily rejected. So I have previously shared with the world in multiple books like Marvelocity, and in a spotlight feature in Back Issue magazine. I've shown the artwork that I did for this pitch that actually did go to Marvel. And that was 3 or 4 years ago now. But basically, I couldn't get the lead book just as it was about ready to come back.
I see.
So there was a lot of artwork I did then, some redesigns, a lot of loose stuff. And the thing is, it still stayed with me, and I kept influencing me in terms of, I would like to sort of exercise these concepts, these character designs. I kept wanting to retool the costumes to make it look like You know, it was sort of like Jack Kirby squiggles drawn on an actual surface. So basically, what I did this year, since we had our pandemic shutdown, I had some more time on my hands because they slowed down production on comics for a little bit.
Yes.
So I had a little bit more time, and I started to say, you know, I'm just going to do these things as paintings just to get them out of my head. So I did just a ton of finished artwork, knowing that it has no full application to, it's not going to be a project for the company. They weren't rejecting it because they already did reject one form of it. But so I finished off more of these things, like as an example, like the first page of the book is a redesign for Reed. And I kept going with more of that stuff where I was designing, like, you know, redesigns of the costume, and and then I had extra characters I was thinking of. So it kept going and going and going, and then I was doing like paintings of
that's great. Yes.
Of what the potential series concept could have been if I had gotten it, which I know seems purposeless, but it was ultimately just to get things out of my head, put them on paper. And sometimes this can happen that, like, when you actually move an idea through all the way to completion, it's almost like, okay, well, that's it. That's all I needed. Now I'm going to forget about it forever. Okay, I'm going to move on from this. Am I done with FF? I don't know. But ultimately, it was very satisfying to put down something that maybe had no other home, but get it out of my head at least.
I understand. One of the images for it that I saw was, and maybe this is my lack of Marvel, deep Marvel knowledge. Diablo, is that a new character? Because you have him with Victor Von Doom, and I don't know Diablo. So tell me about Diablo.
You don't know Diablo?
I'm embarrassed to say I don't. Shame on me.
Oh, well, he's a classic FF villain, and he you know, comes from the Kirby era. He fits right in as having a purple and green outfit. He was supposed to be a sort of time frozen mystic from, or alchemist from centuries ago.
Okay.
And so
that's perfect.
He got revived in Transylvania, and then his whole adventure was to try and take over Transylvania, the country. And then he's been around ever since then, and he's shown up in multiple stories. So I kind of had the thought of like doing a sort of take on Dr. Doom and Diablo, both as being regional figures who, if they did fully kind of coordinate, that they would form sort of an Eastern bloc of something the FF would have to deal with in some regard. I didn't necessarily look to make another storyline based around Dr. Doom being the master villain, because everybody gets around to doing that at some point.
Sure.
I thought it'd be interesting to sort of state, like, the nature of the world is a complicated thing, and these are some of the forces you're out there having to contend with. But otherwise, a lot of the designs that I did for new characters was about going international. So if you think about in the late 60s, there was a lot of stuff that started to emerge, like Ultraman and all these different properties from all across the world, where they had their own live action heroes. And now imagine if Jack Kirby had been able to absorb that stuff in the same way he was watching Star Trek on television in the late 60s. He might have interpreted that in his own way and put it into his comics, because that's how he came up with a lot of the characters that we know today.
Absolutely.
You know, there would be an inspiration that he would then throw into the books, or he would even come straight to Stan with a pitch and say, well, I have this design. And there, in some cases, like we know with Black Panther, there was back and forth, because that didn't just get born as it was. You know, you first had this character called Coal Tiger, who had an exposed face and a striped costume, and he looked terrible. But they knew they wanted to do an African-American or African character. And then it got, you know, redesigned to the point that he would become the Black Panther that we know. So, you know, some of these things he would just throw in a comic book, and then Stan would be dialoguing it later, trying to make the most of, like, I don't know what this is, but, you know, and occasionally they would be butting heads, especially towards the end, about where they really weren't on the same page of what story that Jack had ultimately created.
Yeah, I understand. And also, yeah, I think of the 2001 books and Machine Man coming from that stuff. And of course, I loved your redesign of Machine Man for Earth X and all that you did with him. I want to back to Batman for a second. My favorite image of yours that you've done of Batman is that great Bruce Wayne looking in the mirror, looking in the mirror shot where we see his back and we see all those scars, and every fight that Batman probably ever had in his 80-year career is reflected in that back and everything. And it just is that, like, it hurts to be Batman, and I kind of think that's really amazing.
Well, that was something that I was taking from an inspiration in a specific comic, from something that was described but not shown. So the writer had put the reference in there where Catwoman is fixing up a recent wound, and as Batman's got his shirt off, but not his mask, his shirt is off, and she says it looks like a map of scar tissue. And that creates a powerful impression in your young mind where you think, like, God, I'd like to see what that looks like. So 20 some years later, I'm getting to create that as an image because, it's always stuck with me, is like, yeah, there's a toll to be taken. In fact, the entire nature of how I approached the aging Bruce Wayne in Kingdom Come is with the idea that he's barely holding it together, because you can't, that whole adage about what doesn't kill you makes you stronger is not true. What doesn't kill you may make you a lot weaker and hobble you completely. So, I wanted to pay some close attention to the fact that the Batman, who might have even been the same Batman from Frank Miller's Dark Knight, this is how he's going to wind up after this much trauma to his body. He's going to have like an exoskeleton just to move around.
Absolutely. No, it was amazing. And then even the reveal at the end that he does put on armor of sorts and is back in action despite being in that condition was really, I think, an exciting thing to look at as well in Kingdom Come. Truly the trajectory of Batman is reflected by your art is always really great to see. And it's again, the various versions of Batman, and you're very comfortable in any incarnation of Batman. I mean, again, looking at even the Challenge of the Superheroes image that you showed me with them, and then the roast, and that is slightly different than the Batman 66 version and everything, but they're great. And man, when you did those covers for the Green Hornet crossover, and those were terrific too.
Yeah, I got a good number of opportunities to illustrate Adam West Batman in recent years. It's weird that it took as long as it did for, you think about it, like these guys were out there doing conventions for, I don't know, 30 plus years before they could really cash in upon this connection. And it would wound up being a fluke that we actually got this deal made between Fox and Warner Brothers. It's just, the whole story of how that finally came together is somewhat heartbreaking, because you think, like, there's all this time lost where they could have made merchandise based upon the show, because now you have the issue of there's men in our age group that are the last generation who got the show in reruns before there's sort of a next wave of, young people today won't watch the show the same way, because they have other options. We had no other options in the 70s growing up, or 80s. Right. That was like this show. It was a one of a kind. They never spent that kind of money making an adaptation of a comic thing to film or television until the 90s. And then everybody's grown up since then. They've got a million different other things they could have watched. And any kid that's growing up now in this new century, we become the last connection to the original Batman TV series. So it's you would love to think you can continue to pass it along to the next generation, and I just don't know it's going to work that way.
I agree, man. And good Lord, even the George Reeves Superman is even that much more difficult. And right. I love those I forget if it was just the first season that was in black and white or the first two, but it's like there's just something more grittier about that first season, the Phyllis Coates season of Superman. And I love Noelle Neal. She was amazing, and they all were. And Jack Larson's great, and it became a fun kid show, and it always was, I guess, a kid show, but it was more of an action show, and really had more of a through line to the cliffhangers, rather than the true television kid show that it became. So I love those, like I said, those black and white days of George Reeves.
Yeah, no, I know that my favorite version. Let me throw my George Reeves spread here.
Oh, there you go. Yeah. Yep.
Anyways, George, his depiction of Clark Kent is my personal favorite out of all that have ever been done.
I agree.
In part because there is this slight distinction between the presence of him as Superman and him as the guy in the glasses. And you wouldn't think there is, because of course it looks like the same person, but the performance is that Clark Kent is kind of a all business sort of figure who, when he shows up, he is the reporter here to get that story. You saw more of him doing his job as a reporter on the original TV series. He was never bumbling. He would excuse himself politely or quietly to go off and then have to change, but it would never be this constant thing of the whole, oh my God, it's so ridiculous and silly that he suddenly trips and causes. I mean, that was what came from the comics and the Chris Reeve adaptation, which is very accurate to the material. But there was something to the original George Reeves Clark Kent is not necessarily a likable figure. He's a respectable figure, but he gets in there and pushes people around like I saw in some episodes, like he's ordering the police to, like, you go over there, do this, take care of that.
Yep.
And it's amazing how that's not what we think of when we think of Clark Kent. And that's been lost over time.
Agreed.
You know,
I love those conversations he has with Inspector Henderson, where he's like, now don't try and soft soap me, Bill. You're holding back on something. All right, Kent. And also, I love when Jack Larson, when they're in trouble, they don't say, I wish Superman was here. They mostly say, I wish Mr. Kent were here. He'd know what to do. And I just kind of love that subtext of that. Yeah, like Clark is really this, like you said, authoritative figure in their lives, that they take their cues from him. And you're right. He's tough. He's a tough investigative journalist, which is great.
And you know what actually screwed all this up? It's not just about however, the comics had years of doing the whole bumbling thing with Clark for different iterations of of the eras of Superman, but it's that once you started to have, with the 78 movie, the idea that there needed to be this grand romance, this operatic romance between Lois and Clark that must be the driving force of this whole narrative. And it had to be such an overwhelming piece of Clark's life. He couldn't be the guy who just was there to do the job. And it sort of took over the whole direction for how people see the character. But that's not what he had been before. Much like Batman's never truly been anchored by one romance that guides his focus. That wasn't so much the case with Superman. Yeah, you've got decades of the whole playing around with Lois, but we've also got a lot of those stories where he is absolutely cruel to this woman that he works with, who is always conspiring to try and expose Superman's identity, or she wants to get married to him. Not the best characterization for her, but the thing is that wouldn't be the way that he was pigeonholed. Is just that this is the most controlling factor in his life, this romance, or that romance itself was the most impactful need in his character.
How do you feel about the way the Golden Age Superman's trajectory, again, a character that you played with in, not only in Kingdom Come, but also in the JSA run of Thy Kingdom Come? I really like how their lives kind of, since then, certainly Earth 1 Superman did marry Lois and everything. But I really liked the father figure that Golden Age Superman always represented as the first hero and as like kind of the leader and the inspiration. And I really loved what you and Johns and no, shame on me, I'm blanking on who else was drawing it when you weren't drawing it.
Dale Eaglesham.
Dale Eaglesham, of course it was. Yes, thank you. Yeah, man. I mean, just those poses that you have in the Kingdom Come covers and the JSA covers, and even in the interior, the weight of the world that is on the Golden Age Superman, and just the responsibility, the shame sometimes. And I mean, certainly that came through in Kingdom Come, and it was great to hear George play that, and Susan playing that fighting Wonder Woman as well, kind of trying to like look, talk is done, we got to fight. And really, it was a pleasure hearing them bring, you know, what you and Mark, you know, put on the page and everything to life. But I just love that about Golden Age Superman, and I wish that version was still around as another character.
Yeah, it's a tough thing because you find with everybody that gets the character to write on a monthly basis, it seems to follow kind of a common trajectory of how he's got to be this very restrained and I don't know, kind of characterless version of Superman, where he can't be too edgy. He can't seem to show too much of a self-possession of like that he's got a certain grit to him. And it's something I've always felt has been lost in the modern interpretations over the last, I don't know, it's hard to say. Honestly, I feel like once it migrated from the art style of Joe Shuster to Wayne Boring, who was there almost at the beginning, doing a lot of the ghosting for Joe Shuster, when it turned into that late 40s art style and then the 50s, 60s, Superman was kind of the everyman, but not, he didn't have the chip on his shoulder. They always felt the Golden Age artwork looked like there's a character with an edge. You know, he had the squinting-eyed Clint Eastwood thing going on all the time originally. So I always responded to that when I saw it in reprints that I would read. And it became more crystallized in my mind that that's what I wanted to do when I approached doing it professionally. And I can also thank the precedent of seeing what my friend Steve Rude did with his version in World's Finest. So between watching the Fleischer cartoons and the influence from Steve, all that sort of put me in the trajectory of trying to do a version that was Superman with teeth, that like, you know, this is not the guy who's going to put up with all of our crap. You know, he's liable to, if he doesn't hurt you, he could really hurt you kind of guy, you know. But there's something I don't think that quite connects with a majority of writers with the character. Like they just don't see him as somebody that could be as, I don't know, stoic as I think he should be characterized as.
Interesting. I understand. And by the way, Steve doing great work in Marvels as well. And that Avengers story that he does in your Marvels run is really great. Now, always, I mean, and I agree with you. My God, that Superman Hulk thing that he and Dave Gibbons did.
Right. Yeah.
Just great stuff. Absolutely, man. And listen, you've been generous with your time, but I only had like one more thing I wanted to ask you about, and that is, I understand. And again, Sal is my leader in terms of asking about the Justice League Snyder cut, and what.
Why is that a constant question for me? It's like, I mean, well, if I say that
we're all fans and we're all talking about it, Alex, it's okay. I mean, you know, no, honestly, that's something that's come up in terms of what we got on the screen, and it's an interesting opportunity for the filmmaker himself to right the wrongs that he felt, you know, because of his sad complications with the loss of his daughter, and also
right.
The studio not seeing his vision. Now the studio's in different hands. So there's an opportunity for him. I mean, that's a rare opportunity. I know a lot of filmmakers
is, but it also
back.
might be. There may be some misdirection that happens in this, though, because the downside of giving him a new budget for making what effectively sounds like a brand new movie, with new scenes being shot and whatever, gets away from, well, let's see what it was that he would have made if he didn't have the interference that had occurred. If he's getting to basically reconceive what he was going to do, then we're not getting to judge it on the same level that is equal to what he would have done. You know, he now has all the criticisms that have been levied against this work that was released, and he can maybe respond to some of those with improvements. And I almost think he shouldn't be allowed to improve anything that was there in the DNA of it. Like, no, it's got to go out there warts and all, you know. So now, what we do know with that movie, though, as I've watched things on YouTube about it, is it was originally part of a two-part movie concept, that it would have been films 1 and 2.
Correct.
So they had already pulled back on that before he was able to film what he did film for the first film. So they kind of left it as like, it's going to be kind of a cliffhanger at the end, but we're not giving you the full budget approval of just filming 2 things back to back. And so we'll see if it does get a sequel. And that hobbled some of his initial intentions, but he worked around that and then made a version of the thing that we know was finished. And then there was some effects work that still needed to be cleaned up, but that was it. Arguably, that's the only thing that we should get to see at this point. But we know that they're filming new stuff, and we're all going to enjoy seeing whatever expansion of this. But, you know, I was, as a fan who doesn't view the characters in the same way as Zack Snyder, you know, I was interested in turning the page to the next interpretation of this stuff. I don't know that I'll ever see an interpretation that matches maybe what I would perceive of how to interpret the characters. You know, there's gritty and there's aggressive, and then there's things that might feel more on model that I'd like to see for the characterizations. I don't know who will ever bring any of that to life. Maybe one day, and God knows I have to experience seeing my own work getting interpreted from film and television on DC's side these days. He didn't do a lot of that with me, but their other stuff is doing that more now, picking the bones of things from Kingdom Come and applying them to the DC television universe. And, you know, it's somewhat disheartening when you see it all broken apart, as opposed to just do a straight adaptation of that work that Mark and I did.
Well, we would all love to see that. Good Lord. Even, I mean, hopefully even, and to be honest, maybe even more reflective of what you did as an animated movie rather than trying to do it live action. So,
what kind of animated movie would that look like? Would it be anime like all the other stuff they've made?
No, I understand that too. You know, honestly, it's interesting. And I really, from a story standpoint, I liked James Tucker's era of you know, and of course I love Bruce Timm's era as well. And James was working in that Tim era and then kind of took it in his own direction. And even the new direction, I agree with you in terms of the look of the animation. Obviously, having the Japanese, you know, I mean, it's coming from Japanese studios, obviously. But I did see the recent trailer for the new Batman movie that they're going to do. That essentially is a Kung Fu Batman movie with Richard Dragon in it and Lady Shiva and Bronze Tiger. And God, Bronze Tiger, I mean, you know, good Lord, you know, I'm blanking on not obviously Richard Roundtree or someone like that, but like the guy who was in Enter the Dragon with Bruce Lee.
Oh, I don't remember his name. Yeah, I don't remember his name.
Yeah, shame on us, but yeah, you're right. You know, but I mean, that's the great thing. They gave Bronze Tiger a nice '70s afro and everything, and it's like that's great. That's great. Well, and really, and they got the Waka Chicka music going on. So I mean, it's, you know, it's playing like a '70s grindhouse movie, which is fun.
I mean, I guess my objection in part to the direct-to-video stuff is that the promise that was initially shown at the start of it when they were doing New Frontier, Darwin Cook's graphic novel, is that they had the potential, particularly when they worked with Darwin, to come closer to the art style of the given work. And they pretty much immediately abandoned that approach after having done that adaptation, because more complicated art styles like Neil Adams or George Perez, I mean, they did the Judas Contract, but it doesn't look like George Perez. They just realized the limitation of the Asian studios that they were using could only do certain things a certain way. And they never adapted that whole way of finding a distinctive art style to match the material each time they were adapting a different work. And I think that's what we all thought they might be able to go towards, and they weren't capable of it. And so in a way, creatively, I feel like it's been kind of a flat line for me in terms of what they do with that stuff. I would have liked to see sort of proving and breaking new ground in animation. But is that the cruelest critique I could ever offer Warner Brothers for what they did there?
One man's opinion, man. That's cool. I mean, no, honestly, we all watch this stuff and we all have our opinions. Absolutely. I will say for the live action Crisis and what they did with Superman and throwing in kind of the Kingdom Come Superman, I felt there was a redemption for Brandon Routh as Superman because
but the thing is, they were
ahead.
borrowing my Superman costume, but it was only to get him in as his version of Superman. And then the truth of the matter was they must not have been able or willing to do a deal based upon the production he was part of with, Bryan Singer, presumably that they didn't want to have to either pay out to them. So instead, I got screwed. They didn't pay me or Mark anything
for
using our yeah.
That's very shitty. I'm sorry to hear that.
Yeah, I mean, I don't see any money for the Wonder Woman movie using my armor, or hell, I designed Batwoman, for heaven's sakes, and she's got a whole damn show. But these are some of the issues that I have with not working with Warner Brothers anymore. Is that they can recycle my content, and they used to pay, and I'm not kidding. They paid like a year ago for different things that were kind of discretionary bonuses, is how they call it, where they give you a gift of money so that you're not out there effectively complaining like I'm doing right now, saying, "Oh, I got taken advantage of." I mean, basically in a buildup of a lot of projects over time, particularly peaking last year with the Crisis thing, there was a lot of stuff of mine that was getting in there physically. And of course, the interpretation that Mark and I did of the broken Batman, we now saw portrayed by Kevin Conroy. And
right.
Every fan knows what it's coming from.
Sure.
But we got no love from the corporation. And I have to feel it probably revolves around the new ownership is probably cut the budget of any kind of discretionary money given. So it's a really rotten thing. I can't root for what they do with this stuff. And the most I can do for myself is decide whether or not I'm going to watch it.
That's disappointing, man, because I do know, as you said, as recently as last year, creators were being paid for their inspirations. Yeah. And then, that's
I think
lousy,
all that dried up now. Wow. When the movie of Batman v Superman was in development, Frank Miller, as I was told, got his lawyer to go ahead and sue them before the movie was even out. And of course, he got a settlement taking care of the fact that Dark Knight was the primary influence for the film they were making. So that's the kind of deal they could cut like that then. Sure. But, that's the situation I would be stuck with, is trying to sue them over a mass number of things pulled from one or two resources of comics I've done for DC. And, it's really nothing I want to have to get involved with, honestly.
I understand. No, I'm sorry to hear that, man. Because again, I mean, I know from the CW show, Jerry Ordway was, the characters that he created. I mean, they had, he was getting checks from them, and Marty Pasco, some of the villains that he created that they put on Supergirl, he was getting paid for that. I mean, I even remember during the Nolan movies talking to Neil and Chuck Dixon and some others, and it's like, oh yeah, and Jeff Loeb, oh yeah, they used my Batcave, so I got a check, or they used different aspects of their stories and stuff. So,
and I got paid up until not that long ago. The last thing I ever got paid for was for another Kingdom Come character. The youngest daughter for Black Lightning is on his TV show, and she originates from Kingdom Come. So I believe Mark and I both got paid the same few $100s for her being part of that show. It's something. And that's kind of all you're looking for, is a token of acknowledgement that they know this is how this thing arrived here.
Absolutely.
But now that's being cut to shreds because, the mass number of these things they're making, and, you have to assume the new broom sweeping clean.
I understand. Alex, is there ever any creator-owned stuff that you want to pursue in this current environment? I mean, your body of work is certainly, your fans, it would seem, would follow you if you had, if you partnered with Jim, Kruger. I mean, you and Kruger do great stuff with their effects and everything. And I mean, I know he's one of your go-to collaborators. But yeah, has there ever been anything like, a character or an idea of your own that you wanted to pursue?
Oh yeah, for a very long time I've put things aside, just like I did with this Fantastic Four pitch art. I've
Mhm.
put stuff down on paper, I've planned things out, and I've always sort of bided my time with the feeling of one day I may put my time towards this. The one most intimidating thing for why I haven't necessarily pursued an independent project is how much time I expect it would overtake in my life. So I figure it might almost displace everything else I normally do, meaning I might not have an income if I suddenly am working on my own great American graphic novel, and that thing I do may not be leading to any great payday that's going to cover all the time and creative investment I did in it. It's intimidating when you get known for painting every single page of what you do, because that's more than twice the amount of time it takes an artist generally to draw a normal storytelling page.
Sure.
And if I'm going to put in those kind of months and potentially years making something, I got to be ready, or I got to feel comfortable enough to go off and be committed to that. And I feel closer and closer to that as time goes on. But I'm also lucky enough to say the work I get to do currently, I'm very much enjoying. The period I've been working with Marvel for a while now has been very rewarding. So, and I can't look back at the work I've done with companies like DC and say that there was much left unsaid.
Fair
That
enough. Sure.
I touched almost every property I ever wanted to, put my mark on things in whatever way I was hoping to. And it's not like, oh, I've got all this stuff left over that I never, bother to contribute.
And your Marvel stuff has been amazing lately. I love that you've gone from Hulk now to Iron Man, and I think it's a really cool. I love Chris's story that he's doing right. I loved Al's story and what he's done with the Hulk as well. But I really do like this kind of back to basics, very very gear driven Iron Man versus the AI, kind of
Yeah.
component to Stark's armor and everything. And I think it's a cool idea. And yeah, man, I mean, good lord, I mean, yeah, you were killing it with the Hulk, and now you're killing it with Iron Man, so that's great.
Yeah, I mean, right now on my table is my last cover. I'm working on a wraparound image of the Hulk, and it was a good, fun gig for a long time. I'm scared a little bit to think that once I'm not working on it, or the current creative team isn't on it, what will happen to him? Will he suddenly become the dumb Hulk again? Will he be the, Herb Trimpe Hulk again? I don't know what comes with the character. And I like these icons kind of holding their continuity of sorts of what they've classically been. And at least I view my part and what I can bring to this stuff is to try and somehow circle back to graphically what was the classic version, but maybe my spin is one that will connect the dots back to that thing and sort of brush off the original look for a character design without too much alteration,
I see a lot of Gene Colan in your Iron Man.
You do?
I do. Maybe
Wow.
I'm nuts. I mean, again, you've got. I don't mean to say that you don't have your own look and spin on it. And of course, the armor. Really, I love what you're doing and making it so real and so car influenced and everything. And again, maybe it's just the basics of the helmet, but I think back of that iconic Iron Man 100 or whatever it was that Foom and a million people used of Gene's art back in the day. Um, and yeah, I don't know.
Well, I mean, for me, intellectually, a lot of it is coming from Kirby's uh, version of Iron Man, which, he did him in, actually, the first time that the character launched, it was with a cover by Jack and then a story that he didn't draw.
Was it Don Heck? Was it Don
It
Heck?
was Don Heck, and
Yeah.
Don did a leaner, kind of mostly knight suit of armor sort of shape of figure. And so Stan pulled Jack right back in again to sort of retool this thing that he had to think this might not work. So let's do some other twist on it. And Kirby gave him more of that bucket shape of, being wider shaped. And then they put the finish of gold on him. And so
Yes.
that, of course, lasted for a little bit up to the formation of the Avengers. But when, it was actually not Jack, but Steve Ditko, who came in and gave him the new costume design that we know and love,
The red,
the
and
red
gold
and
costume.
gold.
Yeah, yeah.
So, but every illustration that Jack did, from covers that he would do regularly to he did a few other stories with the character, he took to that like a duck to water. And every time he draws the helmet shape, the exact positioning of eyes and mouth, I always felt like that was the part that clicked for me. And of course, he did that fantastic fight between Iron Man and Submariner. That's a classic point in history. I've recreated that as a painting before. But you know, covers he did then in the 70s. And to me, that impression that Jack did on the character is one that's always in my mind. And it was an early influence going back to childhood that I responded very strongly to his, you know, all those little black squiggles he would put into things. Those mean chrome reflections.
Yes.
You know, well,
yes.
I can go and study chrome objects to get those real reflections that would be on a surface and render that. So I'm always trying to kind of commune with what I feel is the Kirbiness in it. And, you know, it's a whole lot of that. And then a good dollop of Bob Layton's influence from my childhood as well.
Sure. I can appreciate that. Definitely. My favorite design, I had Dick Ayers recreated for me in the early 2000s. I loved it. It was so brief, but when the faceplate had the pie plates that like the points at the top, I don't know. I probably from watching the Marvel superheroes cartoons, that stood out to me. And I think it might've been in the Space Phantom story that they animated, that's where it came from for me. But that's like my favorite early armor look. So I had Dick Ayers draw that for me. It's one of my favorite pieces. It's on the wall.
Oh yeah. In fact, actually, one of the things I completed this month, that'll be a project coming out next year, is I did a page for this Captain America project. That's going to, again, another one of these tribute books where every single page of an original story is done by a different artist.
Cool.
I'm doing a page that's got the original Avengers when they find Captain America when he was in the water after he had been frozen in ice for 50 years. Or at that point, it was only 20 years, but
right.
You know, still. So I recreated that with the pointed.
Oh, great.
You know, helmet design for Iron Man. So I've gotten quite a few chances to draw that old style design. And I would also say I incorporated that a little bit into the modern armor that I put him in now. So
that's awesome. That's fantastic. And the Hulk, I'm sure you read the Black and White Hulk magazine as much as you read the comics back in the day.
Huge influence in my life. Absolutely. All those painted covers is what kind of created me. So
I believe it, man. And that's what I was going to say. I loved the flashback Avengers story they did. And Tony's in the gold, bulky armor and everything in that thing. And I just, You see, again, Alex, this is us, you know, sharing that same era. We were reading the same books. We were watching the same TV and films. Absolutely, man. And that's why I always enjoy
something
like
that. That was a throwback when they were doing that story in the magazine. But of course, you know, we're getting that as kids. And as far as we know, like, hey, that just looks cool. That version of Iron Man. I want to see more of that, you know.
And I always loved that Layton had the walls of armor, the past armor and stuff. And then, of course, that's something else they incorporate. I assume it was Layton, maybe not, but you know, again, that's something they've incorporated in the movies and stuff, and just the different incarnations. But I do, as much as I appreciate it, and that, yes, of course, he's always going to be thinking about improving the armor and stuff like that. It's always those stories where it's like, I got to go back to basics because Norman Osborn has hacked into my AI, so I can't use that. Or God, that great what if when he creates all the armor for the Avengers and stuff. Yeah, I mean, no, any chance to see him in the classic red and gold, it's like, yeah, man, that's Iron Man.
Well, you know, in the last, I don't know, what has it been now, 30 years that he's had, you know, some kind of revision of that classic armor template. There always comes a period, I don't know, it seems like every 5 years where some writer comes in and says, like, no, strip him back to basics. You can wear the classic red and gold. And they do that for a little bit. And it's always fun for guys like us, like, oh yeah, that's the thing I love. But you can tell that it's not connecting with the next generation, that they're not really drawing to it. So when I got the gig just now, it was with the author's intention that we do that original classic armor, not anything souped up, nothing revised, but they wanted something new to sort of spark it with. And they had this design I had done that was actually featured in the Marvelocity book, that we threw in some of that artwork there when Chipka designed it. So it's an old design for me, and where I, tried to figure out how to do the classic suit, but somewhat segmented. And I'm not the only guy to try this. Loads of guys have tried over the last several years. So now my number came up, and this is my shot. And I hope the author's okay with it, because this is not what he wanted. He wanted just pure classic. And now he's getting this certain retooled version. But the hope is, of course, it keeps alive that thing that you and I grew up with.
Yeah.
But with a slight spin.
Sure.
Yeah. Because arguably every movie version that we've had is still largely just a spin, a tweaking of that classic timeless version of the armor.
Agreed.
My only real contribution to it is trying to render it as if it's fully reflective like chrome.
Yes. Which I love. No, that's great. And I loved when you did that with Bucky's Captain America costume when Bucky was Cap for a while. I thought, that's the thing, man. You really, and we see it in Wonder Woman's armor as well to a degree. And there's this, again, sense of realism that if you're playing with metal, it should probably look this way. So I get it. And I think you did great. So that's interesting. I was going to ask if you and Chris on Iron Man, or Al Ewing and you for the Hulk, if you guys had conversations as a writer and cover artist.
No, in the case of the Al Ewing thing, that's just, that is fate, and wonderful fate, because I had no idea that comic was going to be that good or be that in line with the kind of intellectual approach I want to take, which is a more serious appreciation and approximation of Kirby's original style. And he went back to basics with the character. And then, of course, the artist drawing it, it was a phenomenal marriage of everybody involved.
Yes.
Phenomenal looking book, really well written, one of the best books coming out of Marvel. And, at the outset of getting that gig, they were telling us, like, we're not sure how many issues we're going to keep you on for, because this book might not
catch on,
have much of a budget. It might not really be worth it.
Wow. Okay. Yeah.
So I might have lost that gig right out of the gate.
Wow. Sure.
But it wound up being this breakaway success. And, that's all due to those guys making the book.
Yeah, but honestly, man, you're the guy at the front door when it's sitting on the shelf and people are deciding what they're going to buy that week. And thank God, seriously, great work, man, honestly. And
thank you.
And then I feel that way about what you're doing right now with Iron Man as well. So Alex, as always, man, you're generous with your time. I'm always glad when you come back. We have a great conversation. So, and I'm so glad that you're enjoying yourself, and especially in these weird times, So it clearly the COVID is not cramping your creativity from our standpoint, from what we can see.
So far.
Good. Well, that's good to hear. Hey, man, as always, congratulations. The new book, hold it up one more time.
Oh, yes.
So people know to go to alexrossart.com, and it's Alex Ross Unseen.
Yeah.
It's not Gordon.
No, it's not Gordon, but this wound up being our default cover, I'm afraid. So we had to sort of switch off to this, but this is the only way it could look because of the way the design of that painting was.
It's a great painting, man.
But, this had never been on a book or in a book before. So, it's a great way to share that art.
Great excuse. Absolutely, man. No, it was when you made it a few years ago for the 35th anniversary of the movie. It was like, oh, that's beautiful, man. This is
the 40th this year.
Yeah, that's right.
Yeah.
Jesus Christ.
Yeah, man, I was 10 years old going in to see that thing, and that changed my life forever.
See, I was a teenager, and I liked it. But I got to be honest, I never got a chance to tell Al Williamson that how much I appreciated his comic adaptation of the movie more so than the film itself. And I know that he was not a big fan of the film, unfortunately, because he wasn't. It's a kids movie. It's a fun kids movie. It's okay.
Well, it was weird seeing what Al did with it. That he clearly liked certain things like drawing Max von Sydow or even Timothy Dalton, but he never drew Sam Jones to look like Sam Jones. And that's the part that I loved the most as a kid. Like, to me, he looked like Buster Crabbe, and he was very
Interesting.
magnetic as a lead figure. I mean, he didn't have all the sort of angst and baggage that came with a lot of your heroes back at the time. Like, I didn't necessarily want every hero to go through an evolution where they were going to have to build up their thing. He just arrived fully baked and ready to go. You
That's
know, what
true.
do you need me to fix? I'm here, ready to fix it.
That's a very good point. Absolutely, man. That's fine. You mentioned Buster Crabbe. There's another one of my commissions. Jim Keefe did a great Buster Crabbe for me,
Oh,
and that's another thing I got on the walls and stuff. Yeah, man. Well, again, we were watching those serials on Sunday mornings and stuff, you know, on WGN or where or on Channel 32, wherever the hell they were showing them. So I get it, man. Absolutely. Uh, as I said, Alex, always a pleasure. Thank you very much for spending time with
thank
me.
you.
And,
Anytime.
yeah, seriously, continued success. Um, you know, hey, when there's something new, please let's not wait years in between conversations. Let's
Okay.
I'd love to have you back on a more regular basis because there's always a million things to talk about.
Okay.
And absolutely. So thanks a lot for your time.
You're welcome.